The dawn of civilization. Primitive. Dangerous. Exciting. The handwriting is on the wall. If the human race is ever going to amount to anything, it needs
the most civilized caveman I have ever seen.
Look who's come out of his cave.
You're listening to the Knuckle Draggers Extravaganza if you're listening through Z Digital, or if you're listening to this at a later date on Cave Dweller Music. Hope you're doing well. It's Matt here, and I'm going to be interviewing someone from a band who I have had nothing but good things to say. You may have checked out the review that I did for In the Art of My Caged Existence on 4ZZZ, or indeed on Cave Dweller Music. I'm going to be having a chat to John from Woewarden. Very excited about this one there. How are you going today, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. It's good to have a cool change for once on a weekend in Perth. We've had a bit of a hot spell recently, so good to have a bit of a chilled weekend before the tour.
Yeah, because that tour is coming up thick and fast. It's coming off the back of In the Art of My Caged Existence, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But you're going to be hitting most of the major metropolitan areas around Australia and doing so with Christ Dismembered.
Yeah, and we're also quite stoked as well to be doing it alongside quite a few of our close friends and partners, bands based in Perth, such as Crypt Crawler and Drip. We've been friends with them for a very, very long time, and that's just going to make it even better, as well as with Christ Dismembered. We've known them for quite some time as well, so it's meant to be a tour of misery, but it's also going to be a tour of lots of fun times behind the scenes.
It's an interesting dichotomy you've got going there. Everyone that is playing on that lineup do live in the world of extreme music, but like you said, there's bands that you've known for quite some time. There's some that you're rather excited to tour with as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen them all firsthand on many occasions, and we've collaborated even creatively in some circumstances. For example, with Crypt Crawler, they were quite involved. Marco is the frontman in the layout of the artwork for the In the Art of My Caged Existence record, for example. And behind the scenes, I know our guitarist is doing a few little bits and bobs that's maybe in the works as well.
So there is a bit of a pre-existing relationship there with one of the guys laying out the art. Fantastic artwork, by the way. Yeah,
thanks very much. Adam Burke is world-class, and we're very, very fortunate that we were able to commission him to do the artwork for this record. He's definitely in hot demand across the whole metal scene, from international to lucky local acts such as ourselves. So I even have the original paintwork in my room as we speak, which I haven't got around to hanging up on the wall, but it will definitely be straight in the pool room when it's ready.
I hate that feeling though. You got a print, you're very excited about it, but then you have to go through the rigmarole of, okay, do I go through to a professional framing place and do it, or do I go to Officeworks and try and chance my arm in one of the frames there?
Yeah, certainly. It's going to look good when it's up there, though.
Just looking at the Brisbane show, because obviously that's where we are based out of. Are you particularly excited to play with a band that ended up in your Picks of 2022 playlist, that being Alters?
Oh, I'm impressed you've done your research and you've looked at my personal top 20. Yeah, absolutely. I've been raving about Alters to my friends for months and months and months before. I guess, it really got traction with them doing the shows, and I think they did a recent support of international act. I can't remember who it was earlier this year. So to be playing alongside them, yeah, absolutely. It's going to be nice to meet them in person, and I'll try and not be too much of a fanboy.
Is that a strange thing for you, being able to play alongside someone that you've been looking up to? Because you're both sharing the same stage. You're both there to bring that level of misery, but then you meet them behind the scenes and you go, I really liked your album, man.
I think this time round it won't be. I don't know if, without going on too much of a tangent, I don't know if you've ever read the book by Robert Cormier called After the First Death.
I have not.
There's a very, very famous quote the title of the book is after, at the end of saying, after the first death, there is no other. And it really feels like that when you actually do play around artists that you've admired, that once you've done it once, you kind of get over the I guess the fanboyism to a certain degree, and it just becomes, part of, playing in music and having that level of mutual respect between other different groups and artists you admire. For example, there's a guy based in Perth, Louis Rando, who I remember when I first got into metal and when I was 18, 19 and 20, was playing in a plethora of bands coming up in Perth and was drumming for...
I was about to say, was he a drummer? Because that's normally the go-to thing. If anyone's playing in more than one band, they're a drummer.
Exactly. And he was like drumming in Pathogen, which was a very, very big band, came through, in the 90s and noughts in WA. So he was, drumming in that. And now, he's constantly got rafts of side projects that he's working on. And, now we're playing on multiple shows with him alongside us and, just having a chat one-on-one. So it just comes with the territory, I guess, with, it being such a tight-knit scene that we are in Western Australia, and even to win nationally, there's artists I've admired such as Disho or Sam Dishington from Depart. I haven't technically played on a bill alongside him, but I was many, many years ago over in Tasmania watching my friends in Dead Space play, and I was doing a guest vocal part on stage, and Depart was on the bill, and I was very, very, very stoked to see them and get to meet him as well. So it's just part and parcel, I guess.
And that's a really good way of putting it, because that was a similar thing when I first started interviewing. You get really giddy, really excited for the first couple, and even though that excitement's still there, you kind of have a level of, no, this is what I'm doing, and these guys are doing a similar thing as me. They're not on this altar. They're not, pardon the pun, of course, they're not on this pedestal. They're not on this altar. This is what I'm doing. This is my job.
Exactly. Or for most of us, just a very expensive hobby.
Let's talk through the dates that you've got lined up. So you're going to be hitting Adelaide, Melbourne, Brisbane, Sydney as well. You, by the sounds of it, have played a couple of these places before. Is there anywhere on this tour that you were particularly keen to head to?
That is a very good question, and I haven't really thought about it to that degree. I guess I'd have to, without going on about too much, I definitely think the Australia Day show in Brisbane is the one I'm looking forward to the most, because of how solid the lineup is, the fact that we're playing alongside Alters. Misdemeanor, I have never heard of that venue before. I've never played at it.
It's apparently the old Rosies, if you've ever heard Brisbane metal bands talk about it.
Never heard of that, to be honest. My coming from WA and the Hermit Kingdom that we have been for quite some time during COVID, my knowledge of Brisbane metal and the venues really is Fortitude Valley, and that's it. So this is that one for me in particular is one I'm really looking forward to, especially as well because it's on a public holiday. So I'm hoping, with that in mind, that there'll probably be a few more people that, have got the time off or, going to be calling in on a sickie the following day, as usually the case on that public holiday. And
that's normally how it works, hey?
Exactly. So we'll...
And it's a massive show as well. Like, it starts at 2:00 and there's so many bands on there. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I'm glad the rest of my band doesn't drink that much, because I think they're going to have to keep me on the short leash to make sure I'm sober enough before I get on stage and wail into a microphone.
And then you'll be hitting the Tote, the Vanguard, Amplifier, Prince of Wales, and you're back at the Amplifier early on in February with the guys you'll be sharing the stage with a couple of times throughout the tour, Malignant Aura.
Yes, that's right. So our guitarist Dan Jackson, he's been in very, very close contact with Malignant Aura, and I think that relationship's been established a lot due to the common label that we're on through Bitter Lost Records. That's based outside of Perth, just about 15 minutes from my house, as we were discussing offline earlier. And through that, we've been working together to try and establish some shows interstate and help each other out as we do as label mates. So it's been a good synergy so far, and hopefully it'll show when the shows come around.
Let's double down on the label mates aspect and have a chat about Bitter Lost Records. You mentioned there that it's based about 15 minutes outside of where you live. I was mentioning this to you off air, but 3 of my favorite records of 2022 came via Bitter Lost Records. How have you found the relationship so far? You were already an established band, as we're going to talk about a bit later on, but going from Cancer into Woewarden and then onto Bitter Lost Records, how have you found the relationship with them so far?
I found it's been a breath of fresh air, to be honest. When we first started the band way back, I think it was in 2016, we originally were going to release our self-titled, not the self-titled, but our titled EP, Terminal, as an independent release. But through the traction we got from the original video that we released, Distant Dreams, we actually got approached by a label at the time called Throats Productions, based in North America. And I've got to try and be careful what I say here, but I felt like after a while there was a lot of there was a contract that was signed, and there was a lot of expectations that we hoped would come out of the record that weren't delivered upon. And we just felt through the wheelings and dealings associated that with a small label overseas and not being able to communicate and things getting lost in the post, et cetera, it just became too complicated, and we decided collectively that we wanted to go back to being a independent label or independent artist, which is what we did primarily on our last release under the Cancer moniker, Opioid. But following that, and I guess this was probably a bit of a segue into the name change, is at the time, our drummer, Chris Kabauer, who's the frontman of Dead Space, who I was one of the founders and original creators for the Cancer moniker, decided that he wanted to part ways and concentrate on taking a break from music and Dead Space and his other creative entities. And since then, he's moved to Belgium and reestablished Dead Space. And we've continued this enterprise separately. But really, the creators from day dot were Chris Kabauer as the drummer, myself as vocalist, and Dan Jackson on guitars. And given that he had left, as we were in the process of writing Opioid, Dan and I felt that it was best that for that final release, we continue under Cancer. But following that, any creative material, given it was primarily, 90% of it artistically is written by him and ourselves, but that with the other band members giving their little spin on things, we felt like the creative dynamic in the way things are written in the band had changed drastically, and the way it was operated, and therefore the name change felt appropriate at the time to kind of like write off that chapter, not so much write off that chapter, but recognize that as a chapter in our history, and that this is our new path going forward to give us like a real clear, dissociation between Woewarden and what was, Cancer and its ties with Dead Space. Hence that name change.
And it seems like it almost... We're still continuing on the lineage and the legacy, seeing as it is both you and Dan as central pillars of that project. And it just seems as though that, once once one of the members went by the wayside, continued on their own thing, you guys had such a synergy and such a writing connection that it's like, let's continue on with this, but we're clearly going to be going in a different direction.
Yeah, that's right. And through that, to kind of go back and answer your previous question properly, that kind of led us to the point where Dan and I decided, no, well, we've done the independent release path. If we want to really take this to the next level, which we were very keen to do so, we felt like we needed to, find a label that was willing to understand our vision and take us on creatively, but also be one that, we're basically going to encounter the same challenges we did previously through that North American label with the logistics and, promises that weren't necessarily met to our expectations. And through Dan reaching out to Better Loss Records, given that we also have some friends in Perth that had already previously signed to them with other releases, such as Crypt Crawler and Flesh Worship, we decided to have a catch-up one day with him at the Cottesloe or the Ocean Beach Hotel, which is right on the beachfront in the western suburbs of Perth. Had a bit of a chat to him, discussed what we were looking for in our vision, and he seemed very, very keen to take us on board and under his wing. And through that, the combination of him being so receptive to our messages, the fact that Rob from Bill Lost Records is only 15 minutes from my house. I mean, hell, just yesterday, we had some orders from Belgium for some of our merchandise, and he was able to just quickly pop over to my house and collect some of the T-shirts from the inventory we already had packed to send on to the tour. So it's made everything a lot more fluid and a lot easier to manage from the merchandise and printing standpoint, and allow us to concentrate on our music and what we do best. So yeah, we're very, very grateful to have Bitter Losser, and we hope to continue that relationship going forward.
And the time difference would have been a major factor as well. Obviously, even though Rob is 15 minutes by you, but even if he was still based in Australia, there's only 2 hours difference between the West Coast and the East Coast in Australia, but going from Perth to the nebulous North America, you wouldn't trying to organize video catch-ups just would have been a nightmare.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not just that. It's, if logistically with the merch is one thing, having catch-ups is another. And also the fact that the dialogue is very, very open. We're both receptive to each other's feedback and brainstorming ideas. So, there's bits of feedback or suggestions that we've given to him as to how we could manage and market our music, and vice versa, based upon his dealings with management campaigns and other artists and what's worked well with the printers and vendors and so forth. So it's, having that harmonious relationship has really, really been, as going back before, using the term, a breath of fresh air for us. And we're very, very thankful for what he's been able to do for us, and also for a lot of artists in Perth, let alone, the rest of Australia.
It's one thing I do like asking people who, and it's like yourself, we interviewed Freedom of Fear a little while ago, but talk me through a little bit of the Perth heavy scene. Obviously, there's you guys, you mentioned a few other guys from Bitter Loss Records. Bitter Loss themselves are based out of there. And for us strangers on the East Coast, what's the heavy music scene like over there?
I think it's really just a small encapsulation of what you see over the eastern states. The challenge, I think, for us is, because we are a smaller encapsulation, is finding, willing venues and the right size venues to facilitate our shows. It's through. I remember back in the 90s and the noughts when metal was much, much popular in Australia, or especially from what I saw in WA, it was not uncommon for you to go to venues such as the Amplifier Bar in the city, which has, I think, from memory, about a venue capacity of 300, 400 people. And, quite often or not, you would see local metal shows those nights, if not almost reach full capacity or sell out. Whereas most days, if you have a local metal lineup in Perth, we're looking at patrons of like 100, 150. You've done very, very well, but like 100 is usually the target. So it's a much, much smaller than what it was. But the people that go to them are very, very dedicated. Usually you see the same patrons, and they listen to every genre you can possibly think of. It's not like that you have a particular group of people that go and listen to black metal music like us and black metal only, or death metal and death metal only. You tend to see that everyone's tends to be pretty tight knit and supportive of all of the genres across across the spectrum. I guess because let's face it, when it comes to the music we listen to, as the years go by, we are a bit of a dying breed when it comes to metal, and we're the underground is the people that support us. So we do everything we can to support that ourselves. We go to shows locally ourselves, and we're friends with a lot of different bands from different genres, whether it be power metal bands such as Silent Knights, or alternative metal bands such as Icarus Lives, death metal through Cryptcore or Ashen, just a few, and also the old school ones when they have the big yearly metal shows based in Perth. So yeah, that's I guess what it is in a nutshell. And I guess as well, and I'm sure this is the same over the eastern states, there has been a quite big rise in the amount of number of cover bands that are playing as well across the city. They tend to attract a huge amount of patrons in comparison to the original artists. And yeah, with the international shows, you still get big turnouts for them as well. But for local shows, it tends to be a much smaller crowd.
And it's an interesting thing with those cover bands, and I don't know whether this is what you've seen, but I am, 27. So all the cover bands that I'm seeing popping up across the social medias are covering, Limp Bizkit, Korn, and things like that. And all I can think is, really, dude? Like, that's the cover band you're paying like $40-$50 to go see?
Mm. Yeah, it is. I know quite a few guys in Perth that play in original bands as well as cover bands. So, more power to them. I personally don't have a very strong interest to play in cover bands. But yeah, we do see a lot of that as well, how there'll be cover bands that have done Korn. There's ones with Limp Bizkit. One of my friends was a keyboardist in Advent Sorry. He used to be in a cover band, a System of a Down cover band, and I think he's moved on from that. But there's a few other guys I'm friends with that have continued that project. But in terms of the real full-on heavy metal stuff, there is some cover metal bands that I have seen, but they're not operating on a continuous basis. It'll be maybe once a year that they'll do a tribute to Pantera or Metallica or something like that. So,
on the topic of cover bands, if my knowledge is not mistaken, your first black metal project was off the back of your YouTube channel where you did black metal covers, Blasphemous Label.
Yeah, Blasphemous Libel. That's never. I wouldn't say it's something that is not serious. It's just something that because they're technically covers, because of the way YouTube works with how it'll flag detect music in a particular video and then claim copyrights on it.
Yeah.
Nor do I want to infringe copyrights. It's something that I haven't deliberately tried to. And you can see over the years, try and step up the quality of the video editing or animations or all sorts of bells and whistles that you see in most YouTube videos these days. That was never really the intention of it. Blasphemous Libel actually started out of me teaching myself how to do extreme vocals very, 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 very early on. In fact, I think the first cover I did was the Serpentine Offering from Dimmu Borgir, and that was literally about a month after I just cracked the code of being able to do extreme vocals and realize that my strength is that raspy Shaggorath kind of style of vocal. So yeah, I've always kind of, done that off to the side. It's been less of a focus in recent years, since I've always been yearning more to move towards creative outlets and the catharsis associated with that and performing live. But the covers, they taken a back seat, but there's something that's it opened up a lot of different paths for me. It's like, it was before I was doing that, I was seen in Perth as just any other person in the crowd, but thankfully through the world of YouTube and Facebook and people seeing those people's videos, people realize, shit, John can do these vocals. And through that, I got the opportunity to do a studio project based in the UK with an atmospheric black metal project called Inquinamentum for a couple of records, which I've parted ways from since. A couple of collaborations with some other YouTubers on other different songs. And also it opened up the friendships I made through Dead Space that eventually are now my friends who've come on the bandwagon, I guess, for Woewarden. So it's definitely opened up the avenues, and it's something that I'm not ashamed to talk about. And, a lot of those covers I'm still proud of to this day, despite the quality of my video editing not being exactly my strength.
One of the strengths, though, and you mentioned those raspy vocals there, but they are all throughout in the art of My Caged Existence. And I think that was the one thing outside the atmosphere that you guys are able to create, was the one thing that really stuck with me in the first listen. I can't remember the name of the song off the top of my head, but the opener on that record, there's something in your vocals that are unsettling, not in the kind of silencer, death pierce me kind of way, but there's actual, what's the word I'm looking for? There's like a desperation in them.
Okay, so you're talking more about the banshee style wails, like your typical DSBM vocals, rather, as you said, like with like Silencer and Life Lover, that sort of realm versus the typical black metal, East Sun from Emperor, Shaggorath from Dimmu Borgir kind of style. So
and this is a great way, and I'm wanting to actually talk about the album in and of itself, but how do you find, how do you get yourself to that stage where you can have those really desperate, they almost don't sound human, or they're like, the best way I can describe it is they're very desperate sounding, Yeah.
I think going back a little bit to the Blasphemous Libel channel, one point I didn't mention is a lot of why I kept doing that is just sheerly through experimentation. It kind of gave me a platform to, not only because people liked it, but people kind of came back and said, I liked what you do here. And, people are pretty honest with the comments and the view counts, which things get traction. And one thing I kind of noticed early at one point, and it's kind of how I met Dead Space, is I did a cover of a Ghost Bath song. I think it was called Golden Number. And it was like one of the first times where I really tried to have a go at doing the banshee and desperate wails. And part of that's, because I emotionally connected to that song and along with a lot of other depressive black metal music at the time. And through that, I got a lot of feedback from that saying, whoa, that sounds really, really good. And I just, over time, as my music, particularly with Cancer and Woewarden, and the lyrical content I write is very, very personal to me. And as a lot of them is either to do with, pardon the pun, has dealt with woes or events in my life or demons that have affected me, and things that I'm trying to process, that it has a real personal manner to me, the lyrics and the style as a way of being a catharsis for myself. And I think that probably, along with all of the experimentation I did earlier on and just continuing practicing to get stronger and stronger at it, has allowed me to get to the point where you hear that anguish, so to speak, in that style that I'm performing on the record.
That was the other word that really came to mind when I was listening to In the Art, is it felt very cathartic. Like as I was listening to it, I felt as though I was experiencing some sort of catharsis for a malaise, or, you know, something that was going on in the back of my mind that I wasn't even aware of. Is it a conscious thing when you approach a record to have an idea, a feeling, or even sort of a phrase or sentence that you're trying to hit with it, or is it how the music comes out?
I find with most of the music that Dan, or the riff farming that Dan does, and then I kind of help him piece it all together into something cohesive, that he really gives me a platform, because he's such a great writer, in my opinion, that I can work with a lot of different ideas and bits of baggage in my mind, or depressive or anxious thoughts in different ways or forms, and I just am able to pull from that bank and find something that fits. So yeah, it's cleansing. It allows me to think through those ways, but at the same time, I don't want to try and limit myself just to writing around I guess negative themes or stories, which I deliberately as well try to keep open to interpretation, because I want people to make the music their own story, right, not just mine. But I don't want to limit it just to stories that I've had to deal with. I've written, for example, in the Art of My Caged Existence, songs about some of the trials and tribulations that other members of my band were dealing with at the time, and they were processing, but kind of like putting myself in their space and the emotions that they were dealing with. And then there's other examples, such as on the Opioid record, where I decided, rather than writing about these subject matters or depressive subject matters of myself or my bandmates, on that record I just threw the whole that formula out all together and did a concept record based upon a very, very dark piece of 18th century literature that really compelled me, that my now wife got me onto, by Thomas de Quincey, called Confessions of an English Opium Eater, talking about the stories of this very, very famous English linguist, who an essayist, basically writing in a very, very poetic manner the dealings of him being an opium addict in the Victorian era in England, and how that affected him through his entire life, dealing with his chronic pain, his addiction, and also the really fucked up dreams and hallucinations that it imposed on him through the rest of his life.
And now I was actually going to ask about how you came to find out about Thomas de Quincey, but we've just covered it there. It's I'm not going to say a very niche thing to create a concept record of, but it seems like a very well researched and a very in-depth thing to base it around, rather than, like I said, this idea of catharsis, of working through a set of issues.
Yeah, I guess what I liked about that's what really grabbed me about that book in particular, and also the additional essays he wrote following that, called Suspiria de Profundis, or in Latin stands for Sighs from the Depths. Hence why you hear you see, or the title, the track listing on the records called The Depth. There's a 6-part series of The Depths 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is kind of based on quite a few of those dreams that he had while under the influence of opium. And it just got me thinking that, rather than just writing around dealing with depression and anxious thoughts that a lot of us deal with in modern society, especially for myself, coming from the background of living in a pretty privileged country and in a pretty privileged situation, what it would be like to instead process those thoughts and write about the subject matter in the context of addiction as one theme, but also those thoughts from the context of living in the Victorian era.
How did it go about though, the translation of your bandmates and what they're going through into your own lyrics? Was it something that you needed to clear with them? Like, did you present them with the lyrics, they read through it and thought, yeah, that's a good representation of what I'm feeling?
To be honest, as long as it's not really, really direct what is going on in their lives, they don't really mind too much, because most of the music I've written, going back to what I said before, is I deliberately write to be very, very open to interpretation. So you would probably could throw the track lists of In the Art of My Caged Existence onto a dartboard, and you would have no idea which one or two, maybe even three songs, I'm not going to tell you how many there are based upon the experiences of some of my friends were going through at the time, and nor should it be. I'm at the most of the time anyway. When people listen to music, they're listening to the art as a whole. They're not trying to, I guess, process a lyrical content piece individually. And even if people do look at, find that interesting, 90% of listeners are more conscious about whether it sounds good and if it is good, and if they think it is good, they'll maybe then extend to reading the lyric booklet and finding out what's going on through John's fucked up head at the time to try and place something in that is a very, very metaphorical piece into something that they can interpret in their own way and process in a way that connects with them in their own lives. So, yeah, in short, they have seen the lyrics, but none of them have any issue with it, and they trust that I'm going to keep whatever subjects that they're dealing with at their time as confidential as they can. So it's we're not intruding too much on each other's personal lives,
and leaving the lyrics open to interpretation as well gives the listener a little bit more of a personal experience about it, rather than going, I did this, I did that, this is what I'm feeling. If you broaden the scope a little bit, then the listener can see themselves in the lyrics, which creates a bit more of a personal connection for them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the beauty about music and any form of art form is, you go into a gallery and you see, an exhibition where when Van Gogh's exhibit comes to Australia, for example, when you look at all the paintings inside a gallery, and there's ones that are about the haystacks. Yeah, there's the self-portrait bandage of the there's Starry Night. But what you see in the painting and how you interpret what that represents or what the artist was thinking at that forward time is your interpretation, and it allows you to kind of explore ideas and concepts inside your own conscience that I think, just through living life alone, you probably wouldn't really digest to a certain degree. It's almost a way of meditating over your own conscience and thought process in life. And that's the beauty about music, is it's in the same vein. Whether it be visual art or audio art, you can do the same thing. And I want to keep it that way rather than being something that's 100% direct on what that subject matter is.
And the way that you've expressed it there reminds me a lot of something simple like a journaling practice, And often at times, the issues that are going on in your head, once you put them down on a piece of paper, once you have them out of that constant hurricane cyclone spiral in your own mind, and you see them on a piece of paper and you can reflect on them, that alleviates a lot of the stress that they cause, or at least can help lead to that.
Absolutely. And we as Woewarden, I guess that's kind of why we went down the path of this name, wanted it to be this way, is we don't want to be a depressive black metal band that goes and tells people to go out and encourage self-harm or suicide or that sort of thing just to be edgy. We're totally against that, and I don't want to speak on the behalf of the other members, but I have had encounters in my life where I have self-harmed, I have had attempted suicide, I have been dealing with depression all my entire life. But we use Woewarden as a vessel to, I guess, communicate with other people and interact in a medium to say, hey, I have these thoughts. Maybe you have the same thoughts. You're not alone. And we want to use it as a way to, I guess, connect and process those emotions in a constructive manner. And who knows, you might even encourage some conversations between people to, talk about these things and process in a way that's, allows people to benefit themselves and their own lives and make themselves stronger individuals.
And it goes back to something that you said when we first started talking about the upcoming tour that you guys are embarking on. Overall, it is a rather heavy, a rather depressive, a rather morose and melancholy music that everyone in these bands on the upcoming tour are going to be playing. But that's not the message, and that's not the backstage atmosphere. This is what you guys are projecting and putting out into the world through your art, but it isn't reflective of, you guys as a whole, or Christ Dismembered as a whole, or Altars as a whole.
Exactly. And so, the way I see it is, and maybe this is another best way of putting it, but I see when people come to pay to see you as an artist, and when people come to watch your shows, or people come to listen to their music, they don't know you as an individual. They know the persona that is being portrayed on stage, or the art that is being portrayed through a record. And, we're fully aware of that. And with that's the beauty of art, is it allows you to capture that persona or those ideas onto a page. But that's only, a one chapter of numerous chapters within one's life. And we like to keep it that way. I've dealt with artists or, that have been alongside on other tours, or, been involved with other members of other bands that I've filled in for, where it's more than just that. They try to encapsulate it in every chapter of their life. And I think I don't believe in that, because it's not reflective of our personalities. And I don't think that's a way to live one's life, is to put on a Superman cape or a costume in a disguise through every part of your life. It's, we're individuals, and we're multifaceted, and having this as a vehicle to connect with people is fantastic. But there's other ways to connect with people as well, and the friendships that we establish, and the way we will catch up with people after the show and have a chat at the bar. If anybody wants to have a beer with me and talk anything Woewarden or art, politics, poetry, I'm more than happy to do that, and be thrilled to do it, actually. So yeah, that's the way we like to keep it, and it makes the writing process and for us a lot more seamless, and it also makes all the preparations and interactions leading up to a tour or releasing a record a lot more enjoyable, and makes every member of Woewarden want to be a part of the entity, rather than feel like they have to be a part of it and they have to be a certain persona or identity. They can just be themselves.
Pulling back from where we are at the moment, do you still operate under the Duke Ellington quote that if it sounds good, it's good when it comes to your music?
Absolutely. And I'm impressed that you've heard me quote that on one or two occasions, because I think that is the primary key. I think at the end of the day, regardless of how articulate and how, if you think it is pretentious my lyrics may be, or the way in which we present ourselves on stage, or whether you think that I need to use a certain string gauge on my guitars or whatever, or I need to look in such a fashion. Ultimately, it all boils down to the music. That's why we're here to listen to music. So I don't think there needs to be a secret formula that's tried and proven, I guess, across different forms of music. I think you got to keep it. You got to keep the way in which you write music and perform it, I guess, as simple as possible to, and I guess make the process as seamless as possible to generate a good output. If you try and, I guess, overcomplicate things, it can lead to things being overwrought. You know, as they say, too many cooks spoil the broth. So I think that message is definitely reflected in our music, and we'll continue to operate in that way.
The one band for me, at the very least, that always encapsulates this, and I was listening to an interview they did, and I know a lot of people aren't a big fan of the Chats because they think they're incredibly lowbrow and bogan, but Eamon from the Chat said punk is the easiest music to play, but the hardest to convey. And I think with you going off that Duke Ellington quote of, if it sounds good, it is good, there is some undeniable sauce or some extra little spice that goes on top. It doesn't matter what genre it is. It doesn't matter sort of when it comes from, but if it sounds good, then it is good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can be the most technical guitarist in history in a tech death band, and, you know, with 8 strings, playing all sorts of flashy solos, but if there's no emotional connection to the music, in my opinion, or if there's nothing there that really engages with you as the listener, then I don't see that as good music. And that's not discrediting tech death or technical music at all. Like most metal listeners, I've always been a fan of Necrophagus in terms of Australian artists. I love Perth-based local Xenobiotic. And my favorite album last year was a Swedish prog metal / prog death metal album by a band called An Abstract Illusion. And they're extremely technical, but what drives me to love their music is going back to that phrase. It sounds good. It is good. It's engaging. It's full of emotion. It makes me feel something. And that's what makes music great. And going back to what you said with punk, for example, there's plenty of examples of bands that are simply 3-chord thrashers. I mean, didn't Status Quo back in the 70s, joke for ages that rocking all over the world, and their songs were all just basically rehashed versions of 3 or 4 chords. AC/DC have made an entire career off it. With, mind you, there's a few pretty intricate licks and spins that they put on that with the rhythm and lead guitars through the Young Brothers, but it's the same. It all boils down to the same concept that ultimately a paid listener or person buying a record, regardless of how affluent or how competent they are behind an instrument, or whether they don't even know how to operate a triangle in an orchestra, they're going to judge music about whether it sounds good to their ears at the end of the day.
Another band that I always go back to, and I'm glad that you brought up AC/DC, because in my mind, they are the AC/DC of heavy metal, but Amon Amarth have been releasing the same record for how long now? And no matter what, no matter if it's the first or however many they're up to now, you know exactly what you're going to get with it. And
I think the same way with Cannibal Corpse, for example.
Yeah, exactly. It's, what Cannibal Corpse are going to sound like, and it's going to sound good. But that's pretty much everything that I had lined up in terms of retrospective questions. We mentioned that you've got the tour coming up, which starts, this will be going out. Just let me double check the dates here. This one here will be going out on Tuesday the 10th. So this coming Saturday, as this one comes out, will be when the tour will be kicking off.
Actually, I think it's Friday the 13th is our first show in Adelaide.
Well, there we go. Friday the 13th. Nice and spooky. So we've got that coming out. What is the plan for 2023 ahead?
At this stage, we're kind of, without using too many footy cliches, so we're really just taking it one day at a time, or in this case, 1 month at a time. We've got some, plenty of shows packed up to the rafters for us over the next couple of months. As you mentioned, we've got this, we've got the Morbid Misery tour off the back of our album released from last year, In the Art of My Cage Existence. So we've got shows Friday the 13th in April, Saturday the 14th in Melbourne, Thursday 26th in Brisbane, Saturday the 28th in Sydney. Then we come back to Perth and play Friday the 3rd back in our hometown Perth, Saturday 4th in Bunbury. Then we got a few more shows later on based in Perth. I think we've got one in in March with Malignant Aura. I think we've also got our monthly metal special we have in Perth with Hornography. I think that's in late Feb as well. And there's an unannounced show that we'll also be playing based in Perth sometime in mid-April. So for the first third of 2023, we're pretty busy just concentrating on playing shows. And I think after that, depending on if we get any other show opportunities, we'll just concentrate on that at this stage. From a personal standpoint, a lot of us have had a pretty hectic 2022, and I know a couple of our band members are going to have a very, very hectic first half of the year while trying to juggle these shows. So I won't be surprised maybe towards Q3 we might take a little bit of a mini break, and then depending on how Dan and I feel at the time, we'll probably start gearing up then to maybe potentially start writing the next record, or at least get material, start bouncing ideas around the works to put something together. Most of it will be around, if we do that, around the actual, meshing of ideas into something that's cohesive, because as I kind of alluded to earlier in the interview, Dan is an absolutely amazing riff lord, to say the least, and he's always got ideas that he's tracked and placed down into his Reaper archives on his computer, and it's just piecing together which bits sound good, going back to the Duke Ellington quote, and which bits we want to scrap or leave to another day where we think it might work with something a bit better. So that's probably the forward plan at this stage. It's a little bit scratchy going into the second half of this year at this point.
One thing I did want to touch on there, and this will probably be the last thing that we cover, but you said there's a monthly metal night in Perth. That's a pretty cool idea.
Yeah. So that's run by a guy called Dicey Dyson. So he's the behind the scenes. He's also works for Soundworks Touring as one of the managers for that group. But yeah, that's Hornography has been going on now in Perth, I think, for just over 2 years from memory. We've been pretty keen to be on that roster for quite some time. That's the times we've reached out to Dicey. He's, I guess, because we're such, depressive black metal, such a, out there genre compared to the raft of different styles of music there are based in Perth, let alone the rest of Australia. There hasn't really been a lineup that he and we felt would be a right fit for us to play on a bill at Hornography. But yeah, we're going to be playing that show, I think, in late Feb. It's the first one for this year. But he's been operating that alongside the guys from Claim the Throne, which is essentially a pirate metal kind of band that's been around for a long, long time and in Perth, and played nationally quite a few times. Yeah, those two entities have been running that, and it's changed over a few different venues, but it's usually been in quite a humble dive bar that we do on the last Saturday of every month. where they just put together local shows, local artists, whether established or up and rising. And yeah, it's usually a pretty tight-knit crowd that goes and supports those shows. So yeah, we're looking forward to that one.
So if you're listening to this in Perth, keep an eye out for that one there. We will be putting the tour dates on the Cave Dweller Music and indeed the Knuckle Drakers Extravaganza Facebook page. Before we send you off, if people wanted to check out Woewarden's stuff, get in contact with you guys, how they go about doing so?
So the easiest way to contact us if you're interested in shows or bookings is either through our Facebook fan page. So that's a pretty easy one to search. Otherwise, contact us through our email, woewarden@gmail.com. If you're wanting to listen to any of our music, we're obviously on Spotify, like every other artist is these days. For digital purchases, go to our Bandcamp, woewarden.bandcamp.com. And for physicals and merchandise, that's all run through our record label, Bitter Lost Records, which you can go to their Bandcamp as well at bitterlostrecords.bandcamp.com, I believe is the title. But they're also very, very easy to access also through Facebook. Rob's very, very active in managing his page and is constantly interacting with customers as well. So that's how you can reach out to us for shows, digital streaming, and also for physical purchases and merchandise.
Well, thank you very much for having a chat to us, and we'll be seeing you down at Misdemeanor, the old Rosie's venue in Brisbane, when you guys make your way through.
Can't wait. Let's have a beer and have a good chat, mate.